I know their schedule is super tough, but there is no way Syracuse is going to be this bad.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. He is Kenton Gibbs, former NC State defensive lineman, co-host of Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno, host of Locked On Canes. On this episode of Locked On ACC, almost for Louisville. We came close to getting an ACC baseball team playing in the finals of the College World Series. Close but no cigar. We'll talk about impact football transfers, some notes on quarterbacks, and some notes on wide receivers in the ACC. But Kenton Gibbs, I want to open up with this on Syracuse and something that's provided a ton of talking points for shows like ours, but not only ours this summer, has been the ESPN FPI rankings, which are statistical and analytics based. It's supposedly taking the human element pretty much out of it. And I was looking over another angle of the FPI heading into the upcoming college football season and ACC football season. And okay, if I were to ask you which team in the ACC they think is going to collect the fewest wins this upcoming season, would it be fair? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would it be fair for me to expect your answer would probably be Stanford, Cal, maybe Wake Forest, something like that?
It would definitely be Stanford. It's Stanford by a mile. Their schedule is not tough, but I don't think their team is tough either. I don't think that team wins the Conference USA. I don't think they come close to winning the Mountain West. So I think that team is in a world of trouble in terms of talent, in terms of coach situation, all that. Yeah.
But yet the ESPN FPI, and again, this is and the strength of schedule weighs a ton into this when you're talking about the amount of wins they're going to collect. They've got Syracuse dead last. Syracuse coming off a 9-win regular season. I think they got 10 wins last year with the bowl game. Like, I know they've lost some important players, but they've got Syracuse going from double-digit wins and contending for an ACC championship a year ago, because they weren't that far from an ACC championship appearance last year. They've got them down at 4.6 wins. They're behind Wake Forest, Stanford, both at 4.7 wins, then Pittsburgh at 5.9. So I guess, Kenton, we should go through the schedule here because, and again, maybe if Ricky Collins was definitely going to be their starting quarterback, I could see something like that. But I thought them going out and getting Steve Angeli, who I know was not a starter at Notre Dame, but an experienced backup. And every time Angeli got on the field, he looked the part. Like, it looked like he was ready to be a starter somewhere. So, I mean, I think landing Angeli and some other good players in the transfer portal, to me, it's like I feel like Syracuse can at least go 500 and be bowl eligible.
I think that going through this schedule game by game would be very important here, because I think the only way that you can come to this conclusion is if you believe that the human element will overweigh what we see about this team on paper in terms of like, hey, their confidence is going to be so broken so early that they'll struggle to regain it in some of these tougher games. But what we're looking at in terms of this schedule, I still don't see a situation where less than 5 wins is meaningfully possible for them.
Okay, so they open up against Tennessee, which we can agree that's probably a loss, right?
Right.
All right, so then week 2, they host UConn. I mean, that to me, that's more than likely a win. Can we give them a dub against the Huskies?
I'll give them a dub against the Huskies.
I would also give them a dub against Colgate, right? I mean, better known for their toothpaste than their football. I'll give them 2 dubs right there.
Absolutely.
All right. So then at Clemson, we give them an L for that one, correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's safe. That's a safe L.
So you're still at 2 wins, 2-2. Versus Duke at home. I'll say that's, to me, that's probably a loss. I'm going to go with Duke and Darian Mensah being a little bit too much for Syracuse. So I'll stick with 2 wins after 5. What about you?
Okay, I'm with you there. I'm with you there. I think they'll have a tough time with Duke.
All right, at SMU, probably a loss, right?
Yeah, on the road down to Dallas, that's a really, really big change. You're going from the dome to outdoors in Dallas, Texas. I think that's going to be a tough adjustment. I think SMU gets it done.
All right, home against Pittsburgh. Is that probably a toss up, right? I mean, if you're going to be glass half full, you say that's a win. It could go either way. For argument's sake, let's say that's their 3rd win.
Okay. All right.
So then, you move on to at Georgia Tech. That's probably a loss. So we'll stay at 3 wins.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have home against North Carolina. I'll let you. I don't know what North Carolina is going to look like this year, Kenton. Can you venture a guess? Does Syracuse beat UNC and Belichick at home?
Here's the thing. People are going to think I'm saying this because I'm an NC State guy, but this is the honest to God truth. I want somebody to point me to, not in the future, because I know they've had some big recruiting wins recently, and I give Bill Belichick and staff all their props for that. Point me to the talent that you would see as like, hey, this is high-level ACC talent. Point me to it on their roster. Yeah. You can't. I can point you to multiple players on that Syracuse team where I'd say, hey, this is a high-level guy. I would be shocked if he wasn't playing on Sundays. Give me Syracuse in this one.
Okay, so I guess that gets them to 4 wins by our exercise. Then they play at Miami. I mean, listen, Kenton, if Miami doesn't win that game at home, big problems in Coral Gables, because that they need some revenge for what happened last year in Syracuse. So you can disagree with me if you want to. I'm going to say that's a loss against Miami.
Taking the human factor out on paper, yes, that's a loss. Human factor in, we could see a bad Miami. We could see a very bad Miami if we find out that Carson Beck's arm is still like a limp noodle a little bit. So they're struggling there. But I'll give Miami that one.
All right, so then you're still at 4 wins. At Notre Dame, that's a loss, right?
That's a loss. Yeah, that's a loss.
And then home against Boston College, it's probably a win for Syracuse.
Yeah, they're not losing to Boston College. Boston College is awful. Those boys stink.
All right, so if we went through that exercise and we found like 5 wins, and at least one of those was a toss up. So I don't know, man. I think maybe the FPI was on to something. It's and that is, by all measures, Kenton, that is the toughest schedule in the ACC. Syracuse owns the toughest schedule in that conference.
Here's why I say you kind of have to throw in the human factor to only get them to 4. Because if you're looking at some of these games and you're saying like, hey, on paper, who's going to be the better team? Yes, we reached 5, but we all know that some of these teams, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. You're going to have to omit the human factor, because I think that Fran Brown is a much better coach than some of the guys that are lined up in front of him. And I think some of these teams down the stretch that they're going to have to play, it's not just that they're playing these teams, it's that they're playing these teams late. Because I see multiple teams whose seasons could be a wash by then coming down the pipeline for Syracuse. And I think Fran Brown knows, like, hey, this is not going to be a 10-win season. I know that with, Steve Angeli coming in as a first-year QB. I know that with us losing most of our top receiving weapons in terms of Rondé Gaston and Trevor Pena and having this ridiculously tough schedule. So I'm getting the team prepped for that, as opposed to teams that are supposed to be good or teams that have all this hype and all this belief around their program that is going to fade very quickly. He knows, hey, I got half of the college football playoff on my schedule. I got half of it on my schedule. Yeah. I know this year is we're pushing the boulder uphill both ways. Some of these other coaches, some of these other teams that he's playing late, they imagine that they're going to have life easy on Sunday morning, and it's not. It's not going to be that.
Yeah, well, I want to look at some of these other FPI win totals and see what we think. Any surprises in there? Plus, impact transfers in the ACC. Florida State and Miami, on paper, have some of the best receivers entering into the conference. And what about the top quarterbacks? You want to keep it locked right here. Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack, Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. We are only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Keep it locked. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. So you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I was kind of embarrassed because I realized how much I was spending and overspending on things like food delivery and streaming services. But this app helped me so much because now I can budget smarter and save more. And managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch. Make sure for your next listen, you check out our other shows. Kenton Gibbs and Grayson Boone do an awesome job hosting Locked On Wolfpack, talking all things NC State. I host Locked On Canes, talking all things Miami. Speaking of Miami, here's something that is going to make Kenton Gibbs' blood boil, at least for one of these things. So you see this Josh Pates from the Late Kick ranks his preseason ACC quarterbacks. He's got Cade Klubnik, number 1, to no surprise. Then he's got Carson Beck at number 2, the man who a few minutes ago you wondered if he still has a noodle arm, which I don't know if he's ever had a noodle arm. I guess you're saying coming off the surgery.
Yeah, it's the surgery. It's the surgery. Yeah, for sure.
Haynes King from Georgia Tech at number 3. Kevin Jennings from SMU at number 4. Miller Moss, who I'm glad is getting some respect here because I think he and Braum can make beautiful music together in Louisville at number 5. So, Kenton, you probably think Beck is a little bit too high at number 2, but I think they nailed the top 5. No matter which order you put them in, I do believe these are the top 5 quarterbacks in the ACC.
If we're going off projections headed into next year, I completely agree with this list. I talk about all the time how a lot of these lists and rankings, especially for the quarterback position, come down to what type of situation are you playing in? How established is everything around you? And Carson Beck has a lot of established pieces around him. He has backs on that team that played there last year, one of the best offensive lines in the nation, let alone the ACC. And so you bring those pieces together and you say, well, yes, you did lose some wide receiver talent. Yes, you did lose your starting tight end and all that, but you've got guys that have played at both of those positions. So I look at Carson Beck at number 2 and I say, in order to keep my blood from boiling, as Alex Donno referenced, I have to convince myself that they're saying Carson Beck will be the second best given everything that we know about these teams, which I still think is pretty high, but I will admit, I think that this top 5 is right.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. All right, so going back, because we talked about Syracuse having the lowest FPI predicted win total, 4.6 in the entire ACC. Let me read some other ones here, Kenton, and tell me if any of these surprise you. So Wake Forest, 4.7, Stanford, 4.7, Pittsburgh, 5.9, Boston College, 6, Florida State, even 6, NC State, 6.2, Duke, 6.3. How about Cal at 6.5 at 9th in the AC? I'm actually surprised Cal is in front of so many teams with the project. Yeah. They must have an easier schedule.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, this FPI thing is a predictor of what they think you will do next season. And so on paper, I'm sure that Cal doesn't have a ton going on in terms of strength schedule. The only problem is, like we talked about, that human factor is going to human eventually. You're going to see like, oh, these are the ill effects of everybody leaving. I don't think that people are truly respecting the fact that, hey, your starting quarterback, all of your top running backs, all left, everyone. And again, I love Kendrick Raphael. I think he's a hell of a running back. How do you know what the mesh point is going to look like with him and the quarterback if you're deciding to run read option? How do you know what you're going to get out of all of these different moving parts that are coming together for the first time right before the season? Because mind you, Cal's mass exodus in the portal wasn't in the winter window. It was in spring. It was after spring. So you got a bunch of backs that have not seen what this offensive line looks like. And we can all say, well, pulling pin is pulling pin. Inside zone is inside zone. Outside zone is outside zone. In theory, yes, but everybody runs it a little bit different. And you've got to know what develops more often than not. So I think that it's a very, very interesting bid to have Cal that high.
Yeah. And then above Cal, you've got Virginia at 6.6 wins projected, North Carolina 6.7, Louisville 6.7. That's low, right? I mean, it's just right off the bat there for a Louisville team that, again, was not far out of contending for an ACC championship last year. 6.7 to me, like I feel like Louisville is a top 4 team in the ACC. Like I think they're going to contend this year.
I understand, but Louisville, I love me some Louisville, so I don't want anybody to take this wrong. They're the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of the ACC. You don't know how good or bad of a team. They had one of the best wins of the ACC last year and beating Clemson handily. They didn't like slowly. It wasn't like we just held on long enough and Clemson gave out and we scored a touchdown. No, they dominated that game. Like there's not a world in which you could say, hey, Clemson was punching and they were right there until this very moment. No. They thoroughly dominated the game. And then they went on to lose to Stanford. So it's like, which Louisville are we going to see from week to week? So I understand why there's apprehension here from the computers at least.
Yeah, that's fair. So then you get into the top 5. Georgia Tech, 7.5 wins. That sounds about like Georgia Tech is usually like perennial kind of in that area. Virginia Tech at number 4 at 7.9 wins. SMU third at 8.5. And then Clemson at Miami. Clemson and Miami tied at 9.7 at the top. And, as the host of Locked On Canes, obviously the never-ending talking point for Miami is, can reality meet the expectations, right? If Miami's predicted to be right up there at the top of the conference, can they actually produce? Can they actually go out there and meet or exceed expectations? Whereas Clemson tends to do that. Like Clemson tends to either meet or, like last year, even exceed their expectations. So Dabo Swinney has the history of doing that. Miami does not have that history.
I want to know what Virginia Tech did to get up there. Whose palms did they grease to end up with that high of a win prediction next year? Because don't get me wrong, I think that Kyron Jones is, in terms of players, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of the conference. I think that he can be fantastic when he's rolling at his highest clip. But if we do the same exercise for Virginia Tech that we did for Syracuse, and we talk about, all right, which of these games are wins, which of these games are losses, I don't seriously see how you end up in a space where you said theirs was what, 7.5? They start off
7.5
with South Carolina.
7.9. So you can round that up to 8.
All right, so let's do 8. They start off with South Carolina and Vanderbilt. How you feel about those two games?
1-1 at best.
Okay, and then we go to Old Dominion.
Well, you never know against Old. I'm gonna lean to Virginia Tech, but you never know in that game.
All right, so we're up to 2 wins. Wofford.
I'm gonna give that a win.
At NC State.
Toss up. I think NC State can definitely beat them. Like neither outcome would surprise me. Virginia Tech or NC State winning that game. So that's a toss up at best.
So it's a toss up, but we'll give it to them. That puts them at what, 4? That puts them at 4 because we got Wofford, 4. Old Dominion, 1-1. And then we got Wake Forest. I believe you get that one. That puts you at 5.
Be a win. Yeah.
You got Georgia Tech on the road.
Loss.
Cal.
Should be a win.
Okay, you got 6. Louisville.
Loss.
Florida on the road.
Florida State on the road.
I'm sorry, Florida State on the road. Yeah. Correct. Florida State on the road.
I'd say toss up because I think Florida State's going to be significantly better. So I'm going to say, like, I look at that like the NC State game. I think toss up.
All right, so if we give you 2 toss-ups, we're going to leave you with 1. We can't give you both toss-ups. We'll give you one, and we'll take one from you. So right now we're still at 6, right?
Yeah.
Then you got Miami.
Probably a loss for
Okay.
Virginia Tech. Could be a Miami win.
And then you got the Commonwealth clash against Virginia.
Ooh.
So that's 7 giving you a toss-up. That's 7 giving you a toss-up and giving you a win over either South Carolina or a Vanderbilt team that beat you last year.
Yeah, they probably lose both of those, to be fair. Yeah.
So I'm not, with all due respect, we were very generous and we still did not end up at 8. We were very generous and did not end up at 8. Come on, dog. And again, I'm not saying this as a Virginia Tech hater. I love me some Virginia Tech. I would love for Kyron Jones to prove me wrong and for me to not feel like Bill Murray on Groundhog's Day, where I'm every year, this is Kyron Jones' breakout year. This is the year he breaks out. This is the year he's going to be ACC Player of the Year. I would love to be wrong. I just don't think I am.
Well, coming up next, we do want to give some credit, even though they are out, to Louisville baseball for being the closest thing the ACC had to a national baseball champion this year. And also, I want to take a look at receivers transferring into the ACC. Which one of these is going to have the biggest impact? You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on Locked On ACC. Thank you for making us your first listen and your first watch. All right, let me see if I can share my screen again for those watching the YouTube version. So, all right, the ACC posted this portal pickup wide receivers who are in the top 50 according to 24/7 Sports. See, Florida State has 2, Miami has 2, Georgia Tech, Virginia, Clemson, Cal, Syracuse, Duke also have receivers on that list. And so the number 1 rated guy who transferred, to an ACC school, Deuce Robinson at Florida State. And, Kenton, I lean on our guy, Brian Smith from Locked On Seminoles, and he raves about Deuce Robinson, who he expects to be the alpha of Florida State's receiving core. And the rankings clearly agree with that. So I think it's fair to say that Deuce is going to be the biggest impact guy, at least on paper, when it comes to receivers with new spots in the ACC.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much of a question about that. I mean, this kid is a giant. He is 6'6", 223 pounds. He looks a lot more like a college tight end than a receiver, but he can absolutely fly and go get it. I'm going to tell you this much. My worries with Florida State this year are very similar to what my worries with Miami were in the past, in terms of the talent is there, the gelling, the cohesion, the can't get right-itis. Can you get that out of your program? And Deuce Robinson is the type of player that helps make those plays where you're like, oh, is the can't get right-itis gone? It appears so.
Yeah, so they got Deuce Robinson at the top. The other names mentioned here, Keelan Marion, who transferred from BYU to Miami. Eric Rivers, who's now at Georgia Tech, transferred from FIU in South Florida. Jamal Erdine at Virginia. CJ Daniels at Miami. Tristan Smith at Clemson. I think Clemson, not just Tristan Smith, Clemson has, probably the best, most proven receiving core in the ACC when you talk about proven talent. Squirrel White at Florida State. Trayshawn Hurry at Louisville, Mark Hamper at Cal, Jonte Cook at Syracuse, Andrell Anthony at Duke. And I will say, especially Kenton, Eric Rivers to Georgia Tech, super important pickup for them because they lost another Eric who's pretty good, Eric Singleton, who is the top-rated transfer portal receiver who went from Georgia Tech to Auburn. They really needed Eric Rivers badly to keep their passing game going.
Absolutely. And Eric Rivers and Eric Singleton are very similar types of receivers. They're both burners. They're both deep threats and all that good stuff. Is Rivers a little bit smaller than Singleton? Yes. But Rivers can absolutely go. Football ain't just about, how big you are, especially at the wide receiver position. It ain't just about how big you are, how strong you are, all that stuff. It's about how you get open. And Eric Rivers does a hell of a job in doing that. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. the replacement of Eric Singleton with Eric Rivers, I think is one of the most meaningful replacements in terms of having to get a guy to replace a guy that went into the portal in the conference.
Yeah, and both the Miami pickups are intriguing to me. I think CJ Daniels, who came in from LSU, I'm pretty high on him. I got to watch him a little bit in spring football at Miami. He was injured for like the first 3 weeks and then was healthy for the final 2 weeks. He's a 6-year guy, and he seems like a leader. Like, I think when it comes to really stabilizing the locker room and kind of rallying the guys, I think his impact off the field is going to be as big as on the field. But the one that they ranked even higher for Miami, Keelan Marion, is very intriguing to me, Kenton, because to this point, with his time at BYU, he's not super proven as a wideout, but he's one of the most electric special teams returners in the country. He returned 2 kickoffs to the house at BYU last year. So with Keelan Marion, I think he's a really fast receiver. Like, we'll see how much like reception production he has at Miami, but I think the real production that he might add at the U is being actually able to maybe score some touchdowns or flip fields on special teams. Because if you notice last year, Kenton, for as good as Miami's offense was, we know the defense wasn't very good. But another area that Miami was lacking last year was the return game was very stagnant, right? It was almost exclusively fair catches in the punt return game, and the kickoff returns didn't really go anywhere except the normal stuff to around the 25. So I think that's the difference where the Keelan Marion can make at Miami.
Special teams is 1/3 of the game, baby. If you've got a game breaker back there in returning, it is one of the best things you can do for your offense, because when you have those shorter fields, it makes it a lot easier. You take a ton of weight off your offense. You're not saying, hey, you have to go and drive 75 yards every time to get a touchdown. Hey, our defense stopped them, in what we call the green zone. They're 10 or in. You're not saying, hey, you're going to get this ball at the 50. You could be looking at a really short field there if you have the right return man. So I think that the addition of Keelan adds a lot to your return game. And even if you don't talk about him as a returner, one thing that I noticed return guys are good at a lot in terms of what they do in an offense, they're gadget guys. You find ways to just get them the ball in what simulates broken field, and they can make something happen. So we'll see if Keelan can make something happen in that regard as well for the offense. Because if you have a quarterback that's coming off injury and he just needs to get a quick completion, well, let's go ahead and create some funky stuff with some motion and get the ball to Keelan where he's got a couple of lead blockers and see what's going on in terms of his speed to get to the edge. So I think that he's a very needed part, especially for this Miami team where you've got a quarterback that, like I said, he's coming off injury. He's going to be healthy and all that good stuff, but he may have times where he's just like, I need a completion. I need to dump it off to somebody that I know this guy's going to give me 5-6 yards just because the ball touched his hands.
I will say, despite the fact that they just lost, congratulations to Louisville baseball for being the closest thing the ACC had this year to a College World Series champ. They do go down to Coastal Carolina in the semifinals. So Coastal Carolina beats Louisville 11-3. They advance to take on LSU for all the marbles in the College World Series. I'm not going to lie, Kenton, maybe because of your geography you will as well, but I'm going to root for the Chanticleers because I don't want the SEC banners to be flying for a baseball national championship. So let's go Coastal Carolina.
When the SEC loses, we all win. You know good and well that all these teams that didn't even make that barely made the SEC tournament are going to be talking about, yeah, you see, the SEC is the superior baseball conference, because the same team that was already there that won one by stealing our player and Tommy White down to LSU last time they won a national championship, they're going to be talking about, see, the SEC, because the SEC as a unit has more pride than the ACC. The ACC, either my school won it or it don't matter. The SEC,
right?
It don't matter who win it. They're all, see, the SEC, we're better than you guys. Shut up. You got 3 schools that are good at stuff. Those 3 schools win all the awards, win all the trophies, and all the rest of you sit there and sop it up. When's the last time that we saw some of those teams win a national championship in anything? But we still got to sit here and, oh, yeah, everything means more down there, bozos. Anywho, go Shants. Go Chanticleers. We are all Chants. Chants up.
Yeah, the whole SEC thing. I've even told you, this sweet lady who works at my local grocery store. She's a big Alabama fan. She's from Bama, but she roots for anything the SEC does. She's all excited about it. Like she was rooting for Florida to win a national championship in basketball. It's like, have some pride in Alabama. You're rooting for other school. So I don't want to hear it from her. The next time I'm buying a loaf of bread, I don't want to hear from her about LSU winning a national championship because she would probably root for them.
Let me tell you something. My granny is rolling over in her bed. She's still alive and listening. I love you, Granny. But she's rolling over in her bed right now because she cannot believe that an Alabama fan is out here rooting for anybody SEC. My grandmother is a staunch Alabama fan. She only roots for her Tide and her Tide only. She don't give a piss about nothing but the Tide. Unlike some of these fans where it's like, oh, is it SEC perhaps? Can I partake in such a matter?
I'm with you wholeheartedly. Well, we appreciate everyone making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. You can check me out also on Locked On Canes. Check Kenton out at Locked On Wolfpack. Check us out on social media at Alex Donno, at TGIF_Kenton. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.